Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jolie Taveno. I'm the Executive Director of the Japan America Society of Alabama. And I see we have Michael Tucker Sensei on. Tucker Sensei, I don't think we can see your video yet, but can you hear us okay?
I can hear you. I should be coming. Okay, can you see me?
There you are, yes. Thanks so much for joining us today. So I know we've got some information up on our website and some great video that you sent us about ACT defense. But thanks so much for being here to talk to us about Bujinkan Budo Taijutsu.
Thanks, Randy.
Could you tell us a little bit about the Bujinkan and just kind of a brief description of the organization and what you do?
The Bujinkan is, well, it's the name of the dojo organization that Masaki Hatsumi founded back, I think, in the 70s. It's named after his martial arts teacher, Takamatsu Sensei, who he felt was a divine warrior. So Bujinkan means Hall of the Divine Warrior. And now, like, it's since the 70s, it's grown into a worldwide organization. So there are members who practice probably virtually in every country. So
that's great. And do people usually? Sorry.
Was there a second part of that question? I can't remember now.
No, yeah, just an overview of the Bujinkan. So you say they practice. What do you all do on a regular basis? I guess across the world to practice Bujinkan.
Yeah, we the martial art we practice called Budo Taijutsu, which Budo means like martial way, and Taijutsu means body skill. So basically, it's the art of using your body to do martial arts. That's kind of the driving factor. So whether it's unarmed or even with weapons, the focus is on how we move with our body to execute various techniques. And the techniques come from 9 classical Japanese martial arts samurai schools, which commonly referred to as koryu, which is like old, I guess, old school. So these things were used on the battlefields back in, the why is the name escaping me? The Warring States period in Japan.
So you said it's different from, I guess, the traditional martial arts, or maybe some of the more commonly known Japanese martial arts for our viewers who do know a little bit about martial arts. What are some of the main techniques and ideas that differentiate Budo Taijutsu?
Well, because it comes from that older period, like the techniques were primarily to be used on a battlefield in wartime, and so some of the original techniques were created with the idea that you're wearing armor or you're wearing weapons. There are multiple people around you, whereas I think modern martial arts have gone to more of a combat sport type system. The training for competitions, that sort of thing, and some techniques have been modified to be safer for the sporting aspect. So like judo is a very popular martial art. It's an Olympic sport, and it has its roots in some other classical Japanese martial arts that were designed like grappling with armor on. And so that changes the way you move a little bit. But here in modern day America, we don't wear Japanese armor or carry swords. So at least for me, my approach is to modify it to try to be more relevant, for the average day-to-day citizen, for use for self-defense.
So you said they modify in other martial arts a little bit for competition sports. Is there any competitive side to the Bujinkan at all?
We don't have like tournaments or competitions in that sense. My personal belief is, there should be some competitive movement within the training process just to make sure that you can actually, be competent. So competition, competence, meaning that there's a progressive, there's a progression from first learning to developing the skill to testing out with someone else who's, also trying to exert their own will. So, which, that's my take on it, how I try to train.
So if other martial arts are kind of modified for that competition sport side of things, how do you train without those modifications and still stay safe? But what are the differences there?
Well, you still do have to do some of the modifications, but that's a common criticism of the Bujinkan, is that they don't have any competitions, or they don't train against resisting opponents, which it depends on, from dojo to dojo, how they train. The common criticism is they don't do any, the Bujinkan doesn't do any sparring, but that is also a dojo specific thing. From what I understand, back in the 70s and 60s, they did do sparring. But, you go to Japan these days, you go to Hatsumi Sensei's dojo, you'll have easily 100 people in the dojo, and it's just not big enough to hold that many people, really. So you can't move around that dynamically, because somebody's going to run into somebody, someone's going to run to the walls. So if it's considered a more dangerous, or a more, like a better term, lethal technique, then we slow it down. But the benefits of doing sparring with it and leaving those more high risk techniques out, you still get the benefits of having your sense of timing improve, increasing your guts for facing someone who's trying to hit you back. So, if you're really practicing something that's designed, again, it is samurai based, so it wasn't like they were friends, they were trying to kill each other. If it's one of those type of moves, then we'll slow it down to practice what that application would look like. So that way we stay safe, but still develop some real world skill.
So would you say there's kind of a balance between the traditional martial art aspect and what they would have done in samurai times, and then what you do now with practical application of the techniques?
Yeah, because the unifying factor is still people fighting people. So the technology that you have, like armor and weaponry, has changed over the years. Obviously, armor is much lighter weight now. A lot of it's somewhat flexible. Definitely, the weapons we use now are different. Because we have modern day firearms. But human beings haven't really changed in the last several thousand years. We still have 2 arms, 2 legs. We still get hurt in the same ways. Our brain is in our head, our heart's in our chest, that sort of thing. So it's just a slight adaptation from how would you move in armor to how would you move without armor. And even with that, how we would move here in Alabama, because it's hot 75% of the year, and it's hard, t-shirt weather 9 months out of the year, versus maybe you live somewhere really cold and you're bundled up all year, or the majority of the year. So that will change somewhat how you would apply certain techniques, with just t-shirts and whatnot. How you might grapple with someone, whereas like something like judo or jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, you use the gi. Well, that may not apply directly into the scenarios we'd have here in Alabama, being, it's 85 degrees today, and t-shirts don't hold up as well as a thick cotton weave training jacket, the gi. But that gi may be more relevant for somewhere up north that's cold the majority of the year, and you actually have those thick clothes that can handle a little bit of grabbing and pulling and whatnot. Hopefully that makes sense.
It does, yeah. That's really cool how you kind of take the same techniques and then apply it to real life and regional attire, but just your situation. So you'd say that this is really a good martial arts to practice for self-defense and knowing how to, I guess, fight or defend yourself in any situation, incorporating the more traditional martial arts aspects and techniques that you would take from Japan and historically.
Yeah, like even within so the Bujinkan, I think I mentioned this before, but it's just developed from 9 classical samurai or Japanese martial arts schools from that time, from the samurai time. But even within that samurai time, there's a span of several hundred years. So even the individual schools, what they focus on was probably influenced quite a bit about the time and place that that school was existent when it was in its prime. So, for example, there was one school that was big on the armor, but also they were considered like a naval force, so they had to do a lot of fighting on ships, and so their postures would adjust for the waves and the rocking of the ship. Another school was considered a bodyguard school, and so most of it is done without armor because you might be in the castle protecting someone because your job is to be a bodyguard, and so you may be holding someone down until someone else can help you hold that person down, and you arrest whoever that person is and then interrogate them or whatever. So that being said, with 9 different schools and all the different jobs and the time, the period in history, the technology they used was different. So the swords might be a little bit different size. The armor might be a little bit different. Maybe it's heavier, maybe it's lighter. And so all that stuff influences how they would fight. And so our historical context, since it was already pretty comprehensive and varied, I mean, it translates naturally to having a comprehensive set of principles to apply in modern day.
So you mentioned that you don't train in armor, obviously, but I know you do train with several of the weapons that would have been used at the time. Can you tell us a little bit about those and what kinds of things you use and how you incorporate them into the classes?
Yeah, so the weaponry, it's a wide variety. So I guess 4 or 5 main classifications. There'd be like stick style weapons, and those range from very short to 7 feet long. Sticks, stabs, that sort of thing. Bladed weapons, so knife, swords, halberd or naginata, which would be the Japanese term yari, which is spear. And of course, those also obviously are a wide range of lengths. Couple flexible weapons, Kusari Fundo, which means weighted chain. It's just a short length of chain with 2 weights on either end. Kyoketsu Shoge, which the name of that is kind of weird because it means something like frolicking through fields and valleys. But it's basically a dagger with a hook on one side and attached with an 18-foot long rope. And at the end, there's an iron ring that's kind of shaped like a donut. And so you swing that iron ring and hit and distract and tie up an opponent. And you've got the dagger if they get in close to use the dagger. And then there's projectile weapons. So, bow shuriken. So it's basically a spike that you would throw. And the ever famous ninja star, which would be called senban shuriken or shaken, depending on the design. And those, you see it in Japan where someone from Japan will hear, oh, ninja, and then they do this because I think it's like based off a video game.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know the 2019 Cherry Blossom Festival, that we still have some of the photos up on our website for our viewers if you're interested in looking at them. There's some good pictures of the Kyoketsu Shoge in motion, and then some of the weapons that you all brought out for the demonstration. So if you're watching and you want to check out some of the photos there, then you might be able to see some of these ninja weapons in action.
Yeah, I've actually got video from the last time we were out there, and I just haven't had a chance to post it. So maybe sometime this weekend I'll get around to posting it or something. Yeah,
that'd be great. And the video that you shared with us that's on the website now is a really good take on the class and the training that you do. And I know you have a YouTube channel that's full of clips from classes and things like that. What does a normal class look like for you, and how often do you meet? Tell us a little bit about ACT Defense, independent from the Bujinkan.
So a typical class kind of goes with, we get there, we do a warm up, which reinforces some basic fundamental movements. We'll spend about the first hour working on basics, the fundamentals, what drives the whole thing. And then the second hour, we'll usually look at some form of some kata, some form from one of the schools or one of the weapons forms, and explore that for that second hour. And that's typically how a class goes. It sounds kind of simple and boring, but there's a lot of variance within that. So, and then as far as ACT defense, when I first moved back to Birmingham in late 2007, one of the guys I trained with before asked if I was going to start a dojo here in Birmingham, and my response was like, well, if people want to train, I guess we'll train. And in previous states that I've lived in, I've tried to have like a Japanese name, but I stopped doing that because, one, I don't speak fluent Japanese. I speak barely any dojo Japanese, martial arts specific Japanese. So I didn't want to like screw up and have the wrong name and it be incorrect, but also it's a foreign language, so that just makes it naturally harder to remember and harder to spell. I mean, I've had people call and ask about Bujinkan training instead of Bujinkan training. So I went with an English name. And so the first iteration was called Magic City Dojo, Magic City after Birmingham. And then I changed it to ACT Defense, I think around 2016. Again, to keep something a little more English based, so it'd be easier to remember, so people can actually get to the training. And then also to reflect that, we offer more than just the Budo Taijutsu, the traditional martial arts training. We do some personal protective measures courses, which those are based on Budo Taijutsu, but kind of stripped down to the bare essentials. So you got someone who wants to have some good self-defense skills, but either doesn't have the time or doesn't have the interest or whatever to commit to full-time training, they can still at least get skills that'll hopefully keep them alive should something bad happen. And then we also do some firearms training, which with the pandemic, a lot of that got bought up. So training ammunition is scarce and very expensive right now.
Wow. So anybody can come train with you? What's your general attitude toward people who have no martial arts experience, or I guess maybe a lot of martial arts experience, but not in this art? How easy is it to just hop into a class and start learning?
Yeah, pretty much anyone can come train. We do have an age limit. We're teens and up because of the nature of the training. There's a certain level of maturity that has to be exercised because this isn't like motivational, feel good about yourself training necessarily. It's not designed for building self-esteem, which you might do for kids. Kids, you see kids martial arts classes all the time, and it's good for developing qualities like teamwork and good sportsmanship, building up self-esteem, that sort of thing. For us, and you can get some of those benefits through training just anyway. But for us, with it being adults, it's like, okay, we need a certain maturity because we're training this old system that was designed for soldiers. So on one level, yes, what you're probably going to use this for, if you ever have to use it, is self-defense, but it's, the original intent was to kill the other opponent, because that's what you do when you're in the military. But again, we've adapted it to civilian use. So it is for self-defense, but through defending yourself, maybe you have to break someone's arm or, throw them on their head, or God forbid, take out a knife and stab them to protect yourself or someone you care about. And so I'm not convinced. I don't have kids, so I'm not convinced that maybe I should be the one teaching kids that sort of thing. I think the maturity has to be there. But so 13 and up can come train. The most important things to have is be willing to work hard and have patience, because it doesn't, you have to put in effort, and it doesn't come overnight. It takes time.
Sounds like it. And we've got some information available on our website, Cherry Blossom Festival page, with links to ACT Defense's website. So if you're watching and you're interested in joining a class, then you can find all of the appropriate information there. So Tucker Sensei, I guess to ask a little bit about your story, how did you get involved in the Bujinkan? What was your original interest in martial arts? Where'd that come from, and how long ago did you have it?
Uh, the earliest age I can remember having an interest in martial arts was about 7. Um, and I had a neighbor who, he was a kid. He had practiced karate, and like he would show me a couple things here and there. And I don't know if that came first or anyway. The earliest inspiration I can think of is I saw a really bad 80s ninja movie when I was a kid. And it is one of the worst movies ever made. It's ridiculous. But, when you're 7 or 8, you think it's the greatest thing in the world. And so, it was a ninja movie. I started like looking up ninja stuff. And at the time, this is back in the, mid to late 80s, there were a lot of frauds running around, just hopping on the ninja boom of the 80s and saying they were ninja because it would make money. So somehow through this process, I was at a grocery store in Gadsden, Alabama, and they had a book section there, and they had a book by a guy named Kirkland C. Peterson, who the book's name was called Mind of the Ninja, and it was basically, from what I understand, his master's thesis in psychology. So basically, it's looking at ninjutsu from a psychologist's perspective, applying Jungian archetypes and all this sort of thing. But it had an address in the back of it for a guy named Stephen K. Hayes, who was considered back then the foremost authority on the art. So I wrote to the address. They sent me back some information. I signed up for his newsletter, and that came in. And in that newsletter, they had a handful of dojos that were existent in the U.S. at the time. The closest one was Atlanta. So I gave them a call and, trying to find some way to train. And they told me they had a guy in Birmingham. And my dad, lived in Birmingham. And so I got in touch with my first teacher, Lee Drew, and started training with him. And I guess well said, I trained with him for a while. And then I had trained with another guy who was in Alabama, Samir Saad. And then he moved back to Paris. And I ended up meeting one of my more influential teachers, Robert Geyer, out in Tuscaloosa, and trained with him for 3 or 4 years. And then he moved to where was it? Indiana. Yeah, moved back to Indiana to run his dad's company, and left me in charge of the dojo. And I've kind of been training ever since. Moved around for jobs in my 30s, and if I went somewhere and there wasn't a place to train, then I would start a group and start training. And now I'm back here, and we've been going strong since 2008.
That's fantastic. So it really has been a lifelong journey for you in the dojo. It's very cool.
Yeah.
So you mentioned having several different teachers. How does information travel from Japan and the Hombu and the main dojo in Japan and Hatsumi Sensei, who you mentioned? How do those teachings make their way to different teachers here in Alabama? Would you talk about maybe the lineage of teachers and how that works?
So it starts with somebody going to Japan to get the information directly from the source. So Hatsumi Sensei retired late 2019, or maybe early 2020. I think it was 2019. He retired from active teaching. Then, of course, right after the pandemic hit. So the dojo structure is there, but I think it's in a little bit of a state of chaos, especially right now. I think the Japanese postal system is not really working at normal capacity or normal operations. So a lot of stuff is not getting communicated back and forth. There are Westerners who live in Japan to train, and so we sometimes get information from them. That's more like updates on what's going on, administratively. As far as the actual practice of the art, for us, for ACT Defense, I've been in Japan a couple times. One of you and have gone to Japan and trained. And of course, one of our friends, Duncan, he moved to Japan, has been there for 3 years and training with Nagase Sensei. But the information came from Hatsumi Sensei, and for us, it went to Nagase Sensei, who's direct student of his, and then to my direct teacher, Michael Asuncion, who's out of Ann Arbor, Michigan, and then to me. And then I try to focus on what they tell me to train on, or what I'm observing that they're training on. So, okay, how do I figure out what he's doing? And so the practice is more like transmission than teaching, meaning like it's a little bit of both, I guess. Whatever I'm teaching, I'm also working on. So that's why, in my opinion, that's why we call it martial art practice. You always hear the phrase like, "Do you know kung fu?" or "Do you know karate?" And it's like, well, I don't know it. I practice it. I think it's too complex, too rich for me to know, at least not in this lifetime. Nagase Sensei has a quote that is like, he practices taijutsu knowing he'll never master it in this lifetime, but maybe the next.
And you mentioned that Nagase Sensei is one of the direct students of Hatsumi Sensei, who is the Soke. So other students and other direct students of Hatsumi Sensei, would they have different styles that kind of, I guess, would the information change based on the style that one teacher might like, or is it pretty much a homogenous kind of training, and does everyone train in the same fashion with one maybe book of rules or texts on the art?
Yeah, there are other direct students, and the way I would look at it is the core principles are the same, but the physical expression is kind of where the art comes into it. So it's less of you have to move this way versus, okay, you follow these principles, and how does your personality also interject into how you move? Hopefully that doesn't sound too artistic, but you can go to Japan and you can tell that the senior teachers, like, even they move different from each other. But if you experience it directly, then you can tell that it's still solid. Like, it's still based on the same principles, and it's not really them being different for the sake of being different. It's just how it naturally evolved. And so, like, even in my own school, like, not all of my students move exactly the way I move. And that's fine. As long as they're like tactically sound and being efficient, then that's the most important thing. How you express yourself past that is how you express yourself. And I don't think it's a conscious thing. I think it evolves naturally over time. I think it's a trap that if someone tries intentionally to move different, that's where they're going to get messed up. They're going to start having inefficiencies that they may get caught off guard and get hit or whatever.
So it sounds like there's some, I guess, room for difference between, if you've got different body types or different skill level, different physical strength, that there's still room to train there, and there's still some good ways to apply the same core knowledge. Would you say that's true?
Yeah. That's why I say, like, the principles remain the same. Like, if someone comes in for the first class, usually I'll ask them a question. Okay, what's the first rule of martial arts? And of course they're like, how am I supposed to know that? It's my first day. The first rule is don't get hit. And so how you do that, there's many ways that can be interpreted. For us, like, because we want to be as efficient as possible, and it's good to make the assumption that the opponent is bigger and stronger, instead of just trying to rely on strength to block. Because if it's just strength, whoever's strongest will always win. If it's just speed, whoever's fastest will always win. So if we're trying to not get hit, just move the target. You can move yourself and maybe avoid the hit. And so that's the most efficient thing to do. Now, if you don't, you make a misjudgment in an actual fight, then maybe you throw your arm up as insurance to block that hit. But it's best to practice, especially if you're small, to not try to match strength with someone who's much bigger. So that's why I like to say, like timing is superior to speed, and distancing is superior to strength. And then, or I'm sorry, structure is superior to strength. And then distancing is superior to just being tough. Like, don't get hit in the face to see how tough you are. Like, move out of the way. It's not really a great theory to test in that way.
Sounds like it. So it really is from a non-confrontational perspective, then, of trying not to get hit versus this, I guess, sparring kind of energy. Would you say, I know a lot of Japanese martial arts are kind of maybe have themes of non-violence, like Aikido, mostly defensive. Would you say that those same themes apply, where you're using your positioning to get to safety rather than engaging, or is it a balance?
It depends on your objective. Like, for example, like if, say you're someone who's married and there's two attackers, they break into your house. Well, in that case, you can't really just be defensive against one of them. You have to get through him to get to the other person and get them off of your spouse or loved one or whoever. So in that sense, you might be very aggressive. If it's just you by yourself and, let's say you go out to watch the football game and, somebody starts harassing you, and, the way that you stay out of the hospital or stay out of prison is just get up and leave, then maybe that's the best strategy. So it's really, the style itself doesn't say be hard or be soft. It has both. So whatever you use depends on what your objective in that situation is. So it's really flexible.
It seems very in line with a lot of themes of Japanese culture as well, that flexibility. Do you think that, so in the dojo and in your experience in the Bujinkan, have you gotten a lot of sense of Japanese culture, or is there any kind of Japanese cultural practices that you do in class? How does the martial art here and practicing it here tie back to Japan?
Well, as best I can, I try to use the Japanese phraseology of the different, terms within the martial art, even though I don't speak like fluent conversational Japanese. The etiquette is the same etiquette is observed, bowing as a sign of respect. Trying to understand a little bit of the Japanese mindset to understand, and as a method of understanding the art. But also, we are Americans, and I have a very American attitude. But what you're saying about flexibility, we make the joke of, is it this or is it that? And the answer might be, well, yes and no. Whereas like an American mindset might say, okay, tell me exactly how this should be. And for us, I think we don't really like that ambiguity most of the time, unless you have a very artistic mindset and you're fine with it. So there's a little bit of that, and I try to teach class with the expectation that everybody at some point will go to Japan, so they know how to behave and what to expect, and not stick out like a sore thumb, not accidentally be rude to somebody, which, it's already kind of strange because, Westerners are typically, Western men especially, tend to be kind of big. We take up a lot of space, and Japan's a small, an island country, and there's not a lot of space to play with. The last trip, one of the guys I was over there with, we were trying to make it to another teacher's class, and we got into the class and we were going back home, and so we hit the late night rush hour, and they were like, we had the guys like pushing us into the trains, like with gloves, and like cramming us all in like sardines. So we're like, standing body to body with everybody else on the train. Like I could barely even move my arms. So, understanding something like that, it's like, okay, you're on the train, if someone's looking to go to Japan, I'll try to give them a little bit of train etiquette, like give up your seat for the elderly or pregnant women, like don't get on the first car because the first car is only for women. don't be loud. Try to be quiet. Those sort of things. Don't, if you're thirsty and you get a drink, stop somewhere and sit down and drink. Don't walk and drink or walk and eat at the same time. That's considered very rude in Japan. And those are just observations from being over there a couple times. And of course, I'm always, if I'm not sure about something, I'll ask you or Duncan or someone who's been there a lot more than me.
That's great, though. It sounds like training really kind of facilitates a reason to go to Japan, and that you've got some good information to prepare people to go as well. Do you find that people who find your classes are usually interested in Japanese culture and then kind of take on the martial arts side of thing, or do you find that they might not know a lot about Japan or Japanese culture and then learn a little bit through training with you?
I'd say that most people that come to the training, they want the training primarily, and they usually don't know a lot about Japan. What's funny is in the U.S., like I've got friends who have taught other Japanese martial arts or Japanese-based martial arts, and they'll conduct things, and I'm like, I can notice little things like, well, that's not technically correct. Like you've been referring to me as Tucker Sensei. Like a lot of American places, they'll say Sensei Tucker, which is technically incorrect. That's not how you would say it in Japanese. The honorific comes after the name. But through class, I don't know how much of it generates an interest in Japan. I know for some of the guys who've trained a long time, maybe not necessarily in ACT defense, but my friends, they may get a stronger interest in Japan over time. Like Duncan started training first and then started taking Japanese, when he was at university, and then went over, moved there to help teach English, and then also train a Nagase sensei. So I think some of the people who train a long time, they start trying to, at the very least, get an educated appreciation for Japan and the culture, not just, not becoming like what I call a Japanophile, like someone who obsesses about Japan, but they've never been there, or they've seen a lot of things, but they have a lot of misconceptions about what those things are. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's great. It sounds it's always good for us to see people getting engaged with Japanese culture through all these different avenues. And I know that training and having you all as a resource for people to come in knowing nothing about Japan and really having no interest in it, and then still leave with something while being able to practice a hobby and something that achieve one of their goals or personal goals for self-defense or physical fitness, anything, and then come out with some kind of understanding of Japanese culture to any degree is really great for the US-Japan relationship. And it's lots of people building that smaller understanding a little bit at a time that really results in a more culturally aware country for us. So I think that's important.
I remember going to one of the Kyobi-kai, and I forgot his name. It's a married couple, guy who moved here from Japan to work for some company, and we were talking, and I think it was when the sushi come out, and I pulled my chopsticks out and took the wrapper and folded it so that I'd have something to prop up the sticks on, instead of just like definitely not sticking it in the rice up, straight in, or just laying it randomly on the table. And he was like pretty impressed that I knew that. And then we talked about like swords, and he's like, "You have a sword? What?" And it seemed to impress him that I knew just even a little bit. I think if someone goes to Japan and they can tell that you've made some sort of sincere effort to learn a little bit, like they are super appreciative of it. Like you're not just coming over there and just being a typical, like, well, I'm American, I do it this way, instead of, wherever that passage is, like, do as the Romans do, when in Rome, do as Romans do. So when in Japan, try to do as Japanese do. At least try.
I think you're right. I think that effort does really go a long way, and any kind of interest or any knowledge you might be able to gain could really help you out if you ever wanted to go to Japan. And it's certainly appreciated by people who really value Japanese culture or are from Japan.
Mm.
So unless you have another remark or something you'd like to cover, I can go ahead and open the Q&A up to our audience. So we've got a few people here. I think I see several familiar names from the dojo. If you guys have any questions, please go ahead and type them in the Q&A or chat box, and I'll go ahead and relay them. And if they don't come up, Tucker Sensei, is there anything else that you'd like to leave us with? Any announcement for the audience, information about how to get in touch with you?
Well, you can find us online. Our website is actdefense.net. And please pardon our progress. I'm currently redesigning it in my spare time. But if you look on our training programs, you'll see the Bujinkan Martial Arts. So if you've got interest in that, you can click that link and it'll have a button where you can schedule a free class. You know, the first couple of classes are free, so you can come check it out and see if it's something you think you'd enjoy. And then as far as social media, we're pretty much AC Defense on practically all the platforms. So
great. Well,
and we're definitely looking for new students, so come and train.
So, and like you said, it sounds like you can walk in with no martial arts experience and any kind of physical fitness, anybody can come train and have something good to take from it. So that sounds great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today to talk to us about it. And I always love hearing about your take on the history of the Bujinkan and your personal story. Thanks so much to our viewers for watching, and I'll make sure that this recording is available on our YouTube channel. And make sure you check out ACT Defense's YouTube channel as well for some more content and more action in the videos. So again, thanks so much, Tucker Sensei, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.